What is up, y'all? Welcome to the American Peloton. I am Jonathan Crane. I am a Cat 2 cyclist out of Birmingham, Alabama. This is my YouTube channel. We're also a podcast.
I'm Ben, road racer, team director for Skyway Cycling, presented by Domestique Coffee, head coach at Skyway Cycling, and former elite-ish mountain biker. I guess we'll go ahead. You kind of have some news, Jonathan, personal
Yeah,
news.
I'm sort of glad it's not picking up on the camera here, but I separated my shoulder on Monday. First ride back on the mountain bike after my fibula fracture in December. Riding a new bike, wider bars on a very chill trail, and I did the classic thing of like I'm staring at the Garmin like, oh, I want to get an even 2 hours in, so I'll do one more lap. And of course, the final lap I did, clipped the bars on a tree, clipped the bars on one tree, which shoulder checked, like launched me, and I shoulder checked another. So you can't really see on camera, but I'm definitely in a sling right now. Got category 2. That's another thing I'm cat 2 at, I guess, is shoulder separations. So I've got a cat
Gee.
2 AC separation right now, but honestly, not the worst thing. It's not going to require surgery. I actually just rode the trainer for an hour and a half before we did this, so it is what it is, just kind of more of the same.
Sweet. Yeah, you just can't seem to catch a break. But
Yeah, this is
you know,
my third
what is it?
broken. Well, it's not broken. It's just separated. But this is my third like injury in the last since April of last year. So I've been like riding bikes, skateboarding for more than 10 years and never broken anything. So I feel like I'm just kind of paying the piper for like a really clean run there. I'm getting it all done at once now.
Right. I guess let's go ahead and talk some bike racing because there was a lot of it since we've
Yeah, there's a
last
ton.
recorded.
I feel like it's still early season, but like we're in the season now. So I guess we'll go sort of chronological order. First thing that happened was CBR, the CBR Roger Milliken race. Really good. First thing I want to comment on is the coverage was really good. You got these beautiful drone shots we're looking at. You're not seeing them if you're listening to the audio podcast, but they had really good drone coverage, and then they did a good job of like showing the shape of the field from the drone, and then cutting back to the camera that was like the stationary. Here we go, the stationary cam, so you can actually kind of like see the shape of the group as the break is forming. You can see the signature helmet cam of Corey Williams on top of that gold helmet in the frame. But this was actually a really good race. They did have to re-upload all this footage because they got a DCMA strike, which like the YouTube algorithm strikes you and pulls it down automatically for music stuff, which I've gotten DCMA'd on this show for using my own band song. So I think they got DCMA'd for the music that was playing at the actual crit was like getting in the microphone of the announcer. So that robot, the YouTube music robot, is relentless.
It's asinine. That'll copyright strike you as
Yeah,
ACDC in the background, like of a
yeah,
racer drone shotting.
just like a very thin, like, yeah, Black Eyed Peas song from 50 feet away while a guy's screaming over it. It was enough. Yeah, it did it. But this is a good race. Like coverage aside, it was fun to watch. I also watched. So I've been on the trainer a ton with all of these injuries, and that is how I've been watching all this racing. I've been glad that there's coverage of so much stuff, including some American racing, so we can get a feel for kind of like who's up and coming. But from this race, we've got a few like through lines that are things that we didn't really know. We didn't really know. If these were going to be names that would carry through, but we called out some people that were kind of like underrated early on in the first couple episodes of the show, and one of them really showed out at this CBR race. Cormac McGeough from the, what did you say their sponsor is?
Canals. It's so if you go to a Mexican restaurant, the chewing gum they have like at the cash register that's like 5 cents for like a packet of five.
Yeah, like the
That's Canals
square.
Park.
It's like
Yeah,
chiclets, but not.
yeah, that exact thing.
Yeah,
What a cool sponsor! Like
yeah,
just getting
that's an
cases
awesome
of chewing
sponsor.
gum.
I
Yeah,
will say with that sponsor, their kit should be better than it is. Like, not that it's not a good kit, but I wish it was like somewhere between like Mape and Jelly Belly. Like Jelly
yeah,
Belly used to have the jelly beans all over their kit, and like Mapai had the tiles, the like square tiles. I wish that they had, a pattern made of the little square gum all over the kit. That's something to
yep.
chew on, pun intended, I guess, for next year, for next year's kit. But
They have
so
a
that
very like classic looking kit, which is like not classic, not being old school because Mape is about as old school as it gets. But
right,
it's
it's
just very
classic.
classic
Like
looking and
it's like
not
classic of when we got into the sport.
yeah, but not like harebrained. I want to say like a harebrained kit,
Yeah,
like
same.
from like a gum or candy company, you know?
I love an unhinged kit. I famously like people hated on the Jelly Belly kit, but I love the Jelly Belly kit. The Argon 18s that like had jelly beans all over them. I would,
Those are
if
sick.
somebody has one of those sitting around, I would buy the rim brake Argon. Speaking of rim brakes, so we're watching it right here, and this is a break of three. It's Cormac, Justin Williams, and one other guy, and Cormac is on rim brake still, so that's another big ups for Cormac. He's on some brand I've never heard of, like Gerard or something, rim brake bike, so
Yep.
he's a fan.
I'm thinking so Zero Uno, their other sponsor is a bike company. So I imagine and the teammate that he had at Valley of the Sun, they were not matching bikes. So I imagine they're still waiting on the team bikes to come in. Either way, like his bike is super cool. Like it's very old school, like Cannondale super like old Cannondale Super Six reminiscent.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm a big fan.
It looks light. But yeah, he was second in this sprint heads up with Justin Williams, which that's the next like big headline to get to is that Justin Williams is back after kind of a underwhelming, I guess, season last year. I think he had a collarbone break at one of these CBR races last year. So he was kind of getting back to it all season, kind of a little bit off his game. I think he
Yep.
won. Did we see his only win last year? He won in Birmingham here, a race that we were both at.
We definitely saw his only like semi-major win. Like if he won, it was a lower tier than Birmingham Hammerfest for sure.
Yeah, I think he won some of these CBRs before he had that clavicle, but yeah, that was one of his only like national caliber wins last year. But yeah, interesting like Cormac, a guy we called out as being a little bit underrated. Big result here. Justin's kind of back. So these CBR races, while they are like kind of local California races, it's also a pretty good like window into just sort of like everybody's form and where everybody's at. But that's just kind of a precursor to the next big thing we've got on the schedule today, which is Valley of the Sun. We're starting stage racing now, stage racing in America.
Yeah, and I mean, Valley of the Sun, it's a three-stage race. Kicks off with a time trial that's usually fairly decisive. This year, less so than years past, but and then a road race and a crit to kind of finish it off. So three-stage American style stage race.
Yeah, so it's basically an omnium. Like stage race is a little bit we're being generous. I mean, it is a stage race. It's scored on time, but it's you know, an omnium is generally like a road race, a crit, a TT, and each of them is scored by points so that the TT doesn't end up deciding the whole thing.
Yep.
So this is like kind of the halfway point, but it's the first stage race of the year. And it's the first thing we've seen with kind of everybody was there. All the big guns were there.
Yep. Yeah, Legion had a team. Aviators had a team. I mean, Canals brought more than one rider. CS Velo was there. We had some NCL riders there. Some Empire guys were there, like Landis Trek, Ride Bikes. It was really a who's who of American bike racing there this weekend, which great to see some early racing and having a lot of people show out.
Yeah, this was the first time that we've seen. So the CBR races, it's like all the West Coast guys are there, and then we had like Swamp Classic, all the kind of Southeast guys were there. We've had these little pockets, but this was the first one where everybody sort of traveled to one thing in the center of the country. I guess if I was better at transitions, I would have found a way to go straight from Cormac being second at CBR to he was eighth on the time trial. The first thing I want to look at is these time trial results. Like you said, it was much closer than in previous years. And my prediction going in, I made a post on this channel last week sometime and said that Project Echelon was kind of the team to beat, and they came out ripping in this time trial as expected, with the
Yep.
top two spots with Zach Gregg and Stephen Vogel. For anybody who doesn't remember, Stephen Vogel is the one who went solo at Armed Forces Cycling Classic 2 years ago, kind of the first big race back post COVID. Vogel went solo and fended off a chasing Legion, one of the only people to do that really ever. So,
Yep.
not super surprised he was able to pull out a big result in this time trial. And then Zach Gregg also like a time trial monster.
Yeah, no surprise those two were like the top two. Brock Mason being in third is super sick.
Yeah,
I
that's
want to
another
point
one
out,
we called out. That's another early, we
yeah,
when we made our list of like underrated dudes, Brock Mason was up there. So
I'm gonna make a point to say that he is probably actually the strongest person in that time trial. Um, I don't know if he raced on it, but on his Strava he posted a picture of his TT bike and it had an aluminum box rim,
yeah, it
like
was like
the
a
top rim you
shallow
get. Yeah.
aluminum. And I think his
Um,
ride was titled like next time I'll make sure to bring the 50 mil wheel or something, or like next time
yeah.
I'll make sure to bring the 80 mil wheel,
Yeah. And
which
I'm
leads me to
sorry, but
believe he was on that on the front.
yeah, yeah, and an aluminum box rim versus a fully decked out TT wheel setup
Yeah.
is more than 2 seconds or
Yeah, yeah.
1.41 seconds. Like
So
he
we're
like
looking at a
this is
two
when he would
second
win.
gap from Zach Gregg at 1942 back to Brock Mason at 1944. And that's Brock, who's on ride bikes. And then his teammate, who's another guy we mentioned early season, a guy that we've raced with here and there. I've definitely had the pants. Actually, if you go back on my channel to my video from Sunny King 2 years ago, Matt Govero was the one who won that race because he got into a breakaway with another kid, and the other kid got popped for doping from winning that race. So technically, Matt won that race.
Right.
Retroactive. He's got like the asterisk. Um, However, I believe that Matt is actually that strong. I don't think Matt is I don't think Matt's gonna have the same asterisk next to his name. I see him out there putting in the miles and the
Definitely.
work all the time, which is why
Definitely not. Yeah.
yeah, that's why we put that respect on his name and put him on that underrated list. So it looks like Ride Bikes, despite not having like, it's like they signed all of, I think we said this too, they signed all of the sort of like underrated hitters of the last couple of years.
Yep. And they had like 5 or 6 people. They brought a full squad to this race. Um, so they showed out, like they came ready to win and racing to win. I think it showed in their
Yeah.
overall result. Um,
Yeah, I feel
do
like
you want to go to?
that was a better result than they've had in recent years at comparable races.
Yep.
Uh, I feel like from the time trial, also, I mean, we got Cormac here in eighth, and wish I had saved this. He posted on his story the setup he was running for the time trial, but he like didn't have time trial gear anymore since he's not on Wildlife Generation. So he was wearing someone's borrowed like Mexican champion skin suit. So he was wearing a Mexico long sleeve skin suit, like an Aero helmet that didn't match that, a TT bike that didn't match any of that. So with some cobbled together gear to come top 10 in this field is still very solid because it's not like, again,
Yep.
it's not like there was no one here. Like this is just the pro one. And what do we got? 100 guys, 90 guys here. So deep field, really good top 10.
Yeah. And it's 10-mile TT, so like the gaps aren't big. I mean
Yeah,
they end up kind of spreading out, but it's a competitive TT because it's 20 minutes long.
right.
So to be up there is amazing.
It's an FTP test for sure.
Yep.
That brings us to the road race the next day on Saturday, where unfortunately, really cool picture from Snowy Mountain here, but you can see an upside down Zach Gregg right here in the leader's jersey. So it threw me off that that is not a Project Echelon jersey. I think that is the leader's jersey for Valley of the Sun stage race, but you can see his head just hitting the asphalt here, which is brutal. This was the final sprint of that race. He got caught up in a crash. It seems like he was one of like not a lot of people went down, but he went down very hard. He lost like 5 minutes. I guess he was able to get across the finish line eventually, but yeah, pretty brutal.
Yep.
Lost a lot of time on that day.
Yeah, and that really affected the GC. Like for not even just him, but like Brock Mason in third was, another move down a lot because he was caught behind that crash, had to slow down and go around it.
Yeah,
I think the stage would have panned out, like the stage results would have panned out a lot differently.
yeah, and in a stage race like this where the time trial is short, there's not there wasn't a stage where there was a breakaway that got significant time, and there just are not many stages. A small time gap like that, like just getting caught behind a crash in one finale is enough to do it. I mean, like we saw, the top 10 were only separated by a handful of seconds, so it's really won and lost on those tiny, tiny, tiny margins. And there's no correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think they do any kind of like last K rule like you see in the Tour de France, where if you're if you're with the bunch when you come into the last like 5K or something, you get put on the same time.
No, because otherwise Zach Craig wouldn't have lost time.
Yeah, that's true. They were all within that
Because
rule.
this is like the final bunch sprint on the last lap. It's worth mentioning this race does end on like a 4 minute climb, but as you can see at the pro level, like a 4 minute climb does nothing to break up the field. I don't think that helps when you have a bunch of guys who normally wouldn't be contesting a bunch sprint, now contesting a bunch sprint.
Right.
It gets a lot hairier.
Yeah, this was a bunch sprint from the non-bunch sprinters. So uh, I see Cormac here. That's a good result from him. I can tell it's him because he's on the rim brakes, and we got that kit we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
Um, so that kind of took Project Echelon, their main guy, out of the standings, but they still managed to pull off a third with Stephen Vogel, which is pretty big. Connor White, though, who is on Austin Aviators, a team we mentioned, that's like kind of the new Legion. That's the like Miami Blazers 2, Legion 3, whatever you want to call them. So first big win for Aviators. Connor White's been on, I think he lives in like Bermuda or something. Also a big Zwift guy.
That sounds
Um,
right. Yeah.
he was on X Speed United, and I used to see him. Maybe it was just a 2020 thing, but he was definitely racing like the high level Zwift stuff all the time. I remember seeing him in all that. And to further the Zwift connection, we also got Jordan Shane, formerly of Elevate, currently of Hugh Dog, which I think that's a question we've posed a couple of times on this channel. Is Elevate still a thing? And my guess would be no.
If I feel like if Elevate was a thing, they would have had a rider at this race,
Yeah.
like at least one.
Yeah, I agree. I think if they were still a thing, maybe even Shane would still be on there.
Possibly. Um, yeah, I guess they're not. I haven't seen any news on them. Nobody, like at least nobody, like I don't want to use the word noteworthy, but like super important is on them now. If they're still around, like
Yeah,
nobody, it's like a namesake or you know.
it could have been a thing like Hincappy. Like there's no pro Hincappy team now, but there's the Hincappy development team. Maybe they have like a local team or a development team, but there's
Sure.
not an Elevate Webaplex like what they were. That kind of like top level team doesn't exist anymore.
Does Hincappy still have a development team? I don't know because
Yeah,
Onto
that's a
was the
good
junior
question.
team,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
now Onto was purchased by EF.
Right.
Now Onto is EF's under 23 development into the EF on U23 team, which is development into the EF World Tour team.
Right. And that's
So
what
I don't know if Hincappy does have any teams anymore.
yeah, maybe he doesn't. I guess Hincapie's son graduated to that EF team, so maybe that
Yeah.
maybe he was like, well, I did what I was trying to do. I got my son through the development phase, and now he's like on to bigger and better things. I'm gonna
Yeah.
circle back to this because I feel like I didn't actually make the point that I was making. the Zwift connection with Jordan Shane, he writes for Zwift Insider. A lot of the stuff you see on Zwift Insider, if you scroll down to the bottom, written by Jordan Shane. I think he must have majored in journalism or something, but still, obviously, I mean, according to this, still elite level rider on the national
Yeah.
stage here. Big result there from him. We'll switch over and talk about the GC though, the final GC. Um, oh, that was the GC. Sorry, Connor White won the
The crit.
GC. I thought it
The
was,
crit. Yeah, no
yeah, we
worries.
skipped over the crit, but to tie it back to the CBR thing, Justin Williams won the crit. So
Yep.
sort of solidifies that the CBR thing was not a fluke, was not like oh, I won an easy local race. He won in a much bigger, much deeper field.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he's probably back. I guess a lot of some of the injuries and maybe some of the time he was spending building Legion as a business is probably it's probably getting to a point where it's starting to run itself a little bit more, or he's hiring more help, and now he's able to get back to training, and we're probably going to see a somewhat return to form Justin this year.
Yeah, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. It does make me wonder. I'm actually surprised that he did this race, that they didn't just send Corey to this one.
Yeah,
Um, because, and I've mentioned this in the past, I know like from the gun, the original plan with Legion was to kind of have two squads and one of them be like the stage race focused squad and that be headed up by Corey Moore, and then the other be the crit squad and have that headed up by Justin Moore. So I don't know if that's like just that Justin wanted to get a high level crit in this early to try his sprinting legs out, or maybe, I mean, it could also be, and this kind of leads into the next point we were going to talk about. There's not really much stage racing, so it could be that they were like, yeah, we would love to have a split team and do two separate calendars, but there's not enough racing for that, so we're all just going
yeah,
to do the same stuff.
yeah. And I think like if you look at the Legion roster, even some of the riders they signed to fill that stage race kind of situation with like Ian Garrison. Ian Garrison's no long, he's not even really racing anymore, but like he's
Yeah,
not there. So I don't know if they even have the roster in depth to have two squads. And plus, like it's not worth it unless you're taking the budget to go to Europe now to do stage racing because there's just not enough in America.
right. Which brings me to another an email that came across your inbox this week and hit our team DMs, our team group chat, which is about Joe Martin stage race. It's not going away, but the amateur stage race, which we were going to target this year, is going away.
Yeah.
So, and we were debating talking about this, whether it was like privileged information or not, but here it is on their website. The amateur race is going to just being a criterium, which is kind of a bummer for us. I mean, I love racing crits, and this podcast is a lot about crits, and I talk about how economically it makes sense that crits are happening because they're more sustainable, they're more exciting to watch or whatever, but that doesn't mean that I only want to do crits. And I guess I
Right.
had high hopes for Joe Martin because, that like Bentonville area, Bentonville, Fayetteville area is like putting so much into cycling. I kind of thought like if anywhere could do it, it was them.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. And like, yeah, we got the email and they tried to spin it as a good thing. Like, hey, if you didn't want to come to Joe Martin because it was a big stage race, well, now you can just come and do the crit. I think that's, and I looked
Yeah,
at the registrations from 2022 for the amateur race. We're talking 20 to 30 riders in each amateur field, which I don't think is enough to justify, like for the promoter to justify. But I don't
yeah.
know how many extra resources it takes if you're already closing the roads for a pro race, you're already getting the police escorts, you're already, getting the permits to put a finish line downtown. I'm not a race promoter. I assume it's not many extra resources to start a 2-3 2 minutes before or 2 minutes after, and then start a 3-4 2 minutes after,
I'm
and
sure
so
the math on it though, like there's a spreadsheet somewhere and they just ran the numbers that like last year that was not enough money, which
Yep.
I understand. This gets to something that I've been wanting to talk about, which is like there's this weird dichotomy in the American bike racing, like people who want to do bike races in America, where anything that is a road race that's like too long or too hilly, people will not show up for. Like
Yep.
Sumatonga, we talked about last week. That used to just be a training race series that we would run during the winter. We would do that same course, loops of it multiple times. But there's an amazing climb out there, like a 5 minute 5 minute like 10 to 15% just super
Yeah.
steep wall of a climb. And we used to do that race where final lap, rather than turning right, you would turn left and go up the climb. And it started out where like half of them would go up the climb, and then over time, people would like not show up to the one with the climb, just show up to the flat one. They cut it down. And the last time I did well at it was the last time they did the climb. They only did it once that year. And even then, it was like people were on the last lap. If they didn't feel like they were a great climber and they hadn't already managed a breakaway, people were literally just pulling over at their cars on the last lap. But the dichotomy there is like people don't want to do hard road races, like hard quote unquote courses, but everyone wants to do a super hard gravel race. Like the
Yeah.
gravel races
Right.
are just getting longer and hillier and more insane. And like, I just don't understand. The only thing I can think is that like being dropped in a road race is more demoralizing, but it's so much harder of a day in a gravel race, just like by yourself.
I think it's the marketing. Like a gravel race is, hey, come out and do this day long adventure that like,
Yeah,
people who sign up aren't expecting to win that. But if I sign up for a 3-4 road race and I get spat out the back, I'm like, what
right.
the hell? And so
Yeah.
I think it's different where I'm not signing up for Unbound expecting to be in the front group. I'm expecting I sign up for Unbound expecting for 12 to 14 hours of riding and like just trying to finish the event. And I think that's the difference.
So, yeah, I think there's no glory. It's like it's marketed in a way where like there is glory in just finishing an Unbound or something,
Yep.
but a like a I'm trying to even think of an example of a really like challenging road race course that still happens. Is like Tour of the Gila still happening? Like if you get spat at Tour of the Gila but you finish it, no one is out here posting like, "Oh, I finished Tour of the Gila. I was an hour down." But people are out here posting like, I took, whatever, 15, 20 hours to finish Unbound. I was
Yeah. I
5 hours
wonder,
after the leaders.
there's like a hardness threshold, right? Like people show out, like, okay, Chiha, right? Chiha Ultra, the UCI Grand Fondo. It's 120, 110 miles, somewhere around there. And like people show out for it. There's a hardness threshold where, like, if something is not easy and it's not incredibly hard, that middle ground gets
Yeah.
abandoned.
It's also
So,
like Chiha it's a race at the front. People are racing.
yeah,
But the farther back you go, the more it is a gravel race and the more it is people like stopping at aid stations, not caring about their position, and like a road race just doesn't have that allure. But like, yeah, that's the mentality, and the fact that like American racing is just so participant dependent on the amateur level. Like
yep,
you just have to have a lot of amateur participants to make it viable. That's what I'm not sure how we overcome that or whatever, because I think we need harder road races to develop talent. I mean, I want to
yeah,
do harder road races. I don't know. That's just
yeah.
me.
I,
I
I
think
mean, I
we do as
think,
a team.
yeah. I think like when I was racing pro level mountain biking. I wouldn't say I was very good at pro level mountain biking, but I had a pro card. So like I would go to these races and they would be like flat, twisty, non-technical single track courses, and it would be, oh, the pros are going to do 35 miles of this and it takes 2 hours to do or whatever, right? And it's like, well, and then we'd go to nationals and it would be an hour and a half, and then you go to a World Cup and it's an hour 20. And so there's this disconnect where the amateur racing doesn't line up with the pro racing. And like I understand why your regular XC mountain bike race wouldn't be as technical as a World Cup. Like, I'm
Right.
not saying that we need to have crazy TV features in it, like regular cross country mountain bike racing, but there has to be a track there where it's like, there's rocks and roots and it's hard to do, and
Yeah.
not, hey, like,
There's
let's
got to be
set
a
these races up for the lowest common denominator.
we're just like missing the middle. It's like we
Right.
either have like the easiest or the hardest, and we need for there to be a middle, but there's also not like an economic incentive for the middle to exist. This is
Yep.
something that my physical therapist for my shoulder and my ankle, who I went to today, is a coach, or his kids all race the interscholastic mountain bike. He's a mountain bike guy, and that's why I go to him. He kind of knows like the physiology and the he like I can say to him, "Am I good to ride the trainer?" and he knows what I'm talking about. So that's why I go to this dude. But his kids all race the high school mountain bike league here in Alabama, which has just broken off. So like I'm on the web page here and it says the NICA League is taking a break for the 2023 season. So NICA was the national governing body, and
Yep.
they set the parameters for what the courses had to be, and basically the courses like had to be too easy. So
Yeah.
they broke off and they're doing their own thing called ACA this year, partially so that they can make harder courses because a lot of the talent that was coming through, the kids that were actually good were just quitting the interscholastic league altogether so that they could race harder races because these courses were like, I mean, they're basically cyclocross courses and they're doing them on hardtails,
Yeah.
which I
Like,
understand for like the most beginner, but that's the problem is that there wasn't, they were going straight from like racing laps around a baseball field to like trying to race at Sea Otter. Or Sea Otter is even
yeah.
a bad example because that course is too easy. But like, I don't know, Whiskey Off Road or something. They were going to like a much more technical, much longer race, something that's like a big gap. I don't know. You name a hard race. What's a hard race, Ben?
snowshoe the snowshoe course at XC Nationals in
The
like
Nationals course.
2019, like, or even just like the Windrock Tennessee National course. Like, the thing is, like, I was on course staff for the Georgia League in 2016 or 2015 and 2016. I was course staff like as like an intern. The the bureaucracy and like creating a course that was like NICA approved is insane. Like, the trail has to be like 3 feet wide, and like there can't be like any real terrain, and there can't be
Yeah.
jumps.
There
Like,
was like no
wheels are not
ability
allowed
for
to be. Yeah,
drops,
yeah.
rock features. He was
None of
describing to
that.
me. Yeah.
Yeah, wheels can't leave the ground. Like, hands can't leave the hand. Like, it's very tame, and so you have these kids, and this is also part of it too, where you have these kids that have a high school, situation. Maybe they find some success in the high school league. They go and race collegiate, the next step up. Well, the NICA was it was any given NICA weekend is more of a production than mountain bike national championships. So
Right.
they go from high school racing to collegiate, and collegiate is no chip timing, like as true grassroots as you can get, like college kids putting caution tape to mark the trail, right?
Right.
So they go to that, and the courses are significantly harder. The Lees McRae course is World Cup level.
So
Um,
like I want to make this clear. You're saying like the production value, so the NICA races like their production value is super high, but
Correct.
the courses are very easy. And then you go to
Yep.
collegiate and it flips where it's like the
Yeah.
production value is very bootstrapped, but the courses themselves they're using much harder trails.
Correct. And so, like, I went to Union College and raced on their mountain bike team. We had a teammate named Eve. He lived in Germany. He was on the German national team, raced a couple World Cups, and traveled a bunch to race. Super legit. Our home course was known as being like the second hardest course. And everyone was like, because we had some rocks on it, had some roots on it, some off camber, like nothing crazy,
Right.
but people were like wigging out about our course. Like, people, like, there were coaches on other teams who were trying to say our course was too hard. Eve was like, and everyone was getting full suspensions, and Eve was like, "This is a hardtail course." Like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about? Like, this is not hard. And he would do the fastest lap times on a hardtail. And it's the gap between how hard courses are everywhere else to how hard they are here.
So I want to put a pin in this and come back to it because I don't want to skip over one other thing. I this is leading perfectly into another big topic we had on, but I think now is the only time I'm going to be able to get to this, which is talking about the hardness of races. The NCL, we've had like no clarity on what was going on with NCL kind of from the gun. Like they're points races, we guess, but we don't know what the points format is. It was unclear if there were going to be any amateur races. It was unclear how long the races are going to be, and they've sort of let it slip. They haven't said specifically what uh, what these races are going to be, but they did let this flyer slip out, which I think from this time schedule we're looking at, this is for the first NCL race in Miami. It says that the pre-race BMX stunt show fan fest community bike ride is 12 to 3, and then the main events are 3 to 7, which are listed as men's and women's pro races and awards ceremony, which to us says no amateur racing at these events, which really makes me question like what is going on with we were just talking about the only way that these things are viable is with participants, like
Yep.
amateur participants. So I don't know. Are they just going to burn investor money on these things? Like where I'm not sure where they're going to be able to create value. And maybe they have something up their sleeve in terms of they're going to try and get me to pay to watch it or something. I don't know. But
Yeah.
TBD on that. The other point that we were bouncing off each other is we think this means that to tie it into the hardness of races things we're talking about right now, these have to be at least 90-minute crits, which I do like. I think
Yeah.
this
Like,
means if it's 3 to 7 for two races, like hour and a half women's race awards, hour and a half men's race awards, I think the time just about works out there, right?
yeah. I mean, that's the math. They're not going to do an hour between races. Like, that's ridiculous. So I think it'll be 90 minutes, 30-minute intermission, probably 90 minutes, and then a 30 minutes like award ceremony wrap up. Um, I do I do think the BMX stunt show is actually a good move. Um,
Yeah, Athens does that, and it's
yeah,
I actually know some BMX guys. Shout out my friend Scott, who's also out with a shoulder injury right now. But Scott, he only like when I talking about bike racing, he was like, "Oh man, have you done Athens?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I've done Athens a few times." He's like, "Oh, we always go to Athens." I was like, "You go to why do you go to Athens?" He was like, "The BMX show." Like the BMX dudes would go just like watch. They would go to Athens for the BMX stuff and then just watch, the races. And he was aware of
yep,
the event just because of that.
yep.
But yeah, I
I
think the
think
BMX like it gets families. Like you see a guy jumping, doing a flare on a quarter pipe or whatever, and you immediately like, oh, what's going on over there?
yeah, like that's the thing is that's anybody who's like just walking down the street is going to be like, "Yo, like what is that?" And
Yeah,
even when I was racing the UCI Eliminator World Cup, they would have like a trials show
yeah,
before
I've
the
seen
World Cup
that.
race. So like it would draw because they have the races in urban centers, so if they have people walking by, the trial show brings people who would not stop to watch a bike race to stop to watch because they want to see like crazy trial stuff, right? And
So
I
that's
think
another
it's a
thing.
good move.
Yeah, that's another thing about the Joe Martin thing that like it doesn't make as much sense to me for that one to go only crit because it is like it's not a it's not in as urban of a setting, and one of the things it has going for it is that there are like big wide open roads that you can just get out in the middle of nowhere in
Yeah,
that area. That's kind of like the advantage they have. So I think that's going when that's sort of more going head to head, like as an amateur, as I'm making a decision like am I going to go race Athens or am I going to go race Joe Martin? Like, kind of hard to get to Arkansas. Not a, they've like taken out the joy of like, oh, I'm going to ride some crazy climb I've never ridden. It's going to be cool back roads. It's like, if I'm going urban crit versus urban crit, I'm going to go to the cooler urban crit. Like, I just don't think they're going to win that battle.
They certainly don't, and I don't think there's enough people in Fayetteville, Arkansas, or within an hour, like reasonable crit driving distance from Fayetteville, Arkansas, to
Yeah.
like to
To fill it
increase
out.
that attendance than
Yeah.
what it already was. And I think having a proper stage race, you go, oh, I'll drive 5 hours for a 4 day stage race, and it's the biggest stage race in the country, and so I'll interact with pros or see pros, and it'll be this big fanfare.
Right.
Um, it's not worth the drive for just one crit for most people.
Yeah,
Um,
totally. So
and I
to
think that
circ
no, go ahead.
okay, I was gonna pull us off of the NCL talk because we have lined up an interview with an NCL rider. So I don't want to keep going deeper on this topic. We'll get more into NCL stuff in the future, but it's my fault that we have not already gotten that interview in the can. I separated my shoulder and I was sitting in the ER on Monday when we were supposed to do that. But we are going to have that coming up, an interview with an NCL writer. We'll so we'll
Yeah,
we'll dive more into the specifics of the NCL format and where these races are, how hard they are, what the strategy is going to be with the points format, all that kind of stuff. But to bring us back to sort of the development side of that missing middle of like hard races, we saw a big win from an American on the world stage the other day. Matteo Jorgenson, who is on Movistar, had a big win at Oman, which you may be thinking like that's not what y'all talk about on this podcast. You're not an American.
no,
That's not American, but we're gonna tie it back. I want to talk about this in the context of like what American racing, the racing we have in America, how that leads to the like international pipeline.
yeah, because the cream of the crop are going to go to the world tour from America. Um, like Nielsen Palace had a big win, had a big GC win, but he's been in the world tour for 5 or 6 years now, and he's just now getting to GC wins. Matteo Jorgensen getting the Tour of Oman win. He was a hot tubes guy, I believe. So it's nice to see him go up there.
So
Brandon
that's the
McNulty,
transition, really, like from
yeah,
Valley of the Sun. So I went back and Matteo Jorgensen. So he's someone that like I knew he was an American. I knew there was an American on Movistar, but I didn't really know much about him. But like you said, he was on Hot Tubes. He was on Jelly Belly to tie it back to the Jelly Bean kits. He was
yep,
on Jelly Belly in 2018. I came over to his road results because when you go to Pro Cycling Stats, that mostly shows like UCI races. But if you're looking
yep,
at road results, that's going to show the American stuff for anybody who's listening internationally for some reason. Road results is like the best aggregator of American bike racing results. Um, yeah, so I wanted to come back here and see what racing he had done in America. And really, since 2018, he has not raced in America. He made that jump to UCI level racing in 2019, and then it took him from 2019 to now. And he talked about this in the interview, the Velo News piece we were just looking at. He talked about how he wasn't sure, like he had a hard transition from American racing to European racing, and it took him all those years to kind of find his feet.
yep. And Quinn Simmons is saying this a similar thing in some of his recent interviews where it's taken him a long time to get a result. He just now got a result. Magnus Sheffield is having a little bit more success, but kind of in a similar boat. Um,
And I think some of the guys that you see having more immediate success are actually the ones who like okay, looking at Mateo's road results here, like he did several seasons. He was like a junior and a U23 for all this, but he did 2012 through 2018. He did a lot of racing in America. The guys who at an even younger age go straight over to Europe seem to be the ones that have more success early on.
yeah, yeah,
What's
for sure.
on Jumbo Visma um what
Set.
is his name? Sepp Kuss. I was
Yeah,
blanking on Sepp Kuss so hard, but yeah, like Sepp Kuss pretty much went from racing mountain bikes as a kid straight over to the world tour. Like he didn't really dabble
yeah,
in your Valley of the Suns and your let's see what other races. I'm looking at Mateo's sort of history here. He has done Valley of the Sun so that's like another, through line we're weaving through this episode. Matteo has done Valley of the Sun a bunch of times, but San Dimas stage race, does anyone know if that one even still happens? I don't know if I've seen San
Uh,
Dimas on the calendar this year.
I don't think so. Um, and even
Tour of
like
America's
Sep,
Dairyland.
yeah, I mean Sep to kind of go to this next thing is he was a true mountain biker like until 2015 or 2016.
Yeah,
2016. Then he gets signed to Rally straight out from being a mountain biker, like a very,
right.
very good mountain biker. Um,
And
and
that
so
was as
straight to Rally.
Rally was making that, like, that was a team that was a domestic American team, but that's when they were making that transition toward what they're doing now to trying to like get over to Europe more and racing outside the US, like racing in Belgium
Yep.
more.
Yeah. So he goes straight from American mountain bike racing and doing some like World Cup under 23 stuff to Rally straight to Europe. And then goes from Rally in 2 seasons to Jumbo and starts winning Volta stages. Like that's
Right.
there was no middle for Sep. There was no middle like, okay, well, you're going to race for a Volo for a couple of years and do Tour of Utah, and then you might get a chance to go to Europe. Like it was straight to Europe for him, and that's why you see him be so
Right.
successful as a mountain domestique straight out of the gate.
And to be clear, like I don't think that the thing that these guys are stumbling on is these teams. Like I don't think Hot Tubes was what was holding him back. Like I think Avolo, Hot Tubes, the teams themselves are all great structures, and we actually need
I
more
agree.
things like that. Like
Yeah,
Lux went away. What's missing is that the races that these teams have to do are not as hard as the races they're going to have to do in Europe, and that's why and both hard from like a quality of the parkour and also the there's a different flow to them. Like a lot of the big American races that still happen, if there is a long road race, there's a big section of that where you're just on like a wide highway. Like even
yeah.
the fairly technical course they've been running U.S. Road Nationals on for the past few years, there's a big section of highway on that thing when you're not on that climb in what is it, Chattanooga where they run that?
Knoxville.
Knoxville. When
They
you're
did
not on
have
that,
nationals in Chattanooga though,
yes. No, I'm thinking of
and
the
they
Knoxville
summit
course
finish
though.
on
Is it
Lookout Mountain.
Raccoon? Okay,
No,
Lookout.
Lookout Mountain. Yeah,
Yeah, but when you're not on both of those courses with big climbs, when you're not on the big climb, you spend a lot of time on like a big wide straight road where it's not that hard to hold position, and if you're willing to pedal, you can move up, and there's not road furniture, and like it's just a different level in Europe. So it's kind of like not preparing, and I'm not sure that's even the point. Like this
yeah.
is like almost totally going against something I said in earlier episodes, which is that I like the fact that Legion's goal is like not to send guys to Europe. Like Legion's goal is to make it where you can just do American racing. That's what they want, is to elevate American racing to a level where it is a profession and it's kind of its own thing.
But there still has to be a like. I agree with you. I agreed on that point too. But there has to be a pipeline to the next level, and it's so like what do you do? Because even our current nationals course is like a puncher course. That climb is 3 to 5 minutes. Like it's
Yep.
not, and
It's not
it's
an
like oh,
alpine
it's a
climb.
right, and it's a 3 to 5 minute climb. They do 17 ish times, and it's considered in America a climber's course.
Right.
With in Europe, that would just be a puncher's like whatever. Maybe ends up in a sprint.
Right. If
Like
that was the Giro, like those climbs on the road book would be just like these tiny little bumps, Like
right,
the Giro's famous for the road book. If the climb's not like 10 to 20 minutes, it's like not even really showing up as a
right,
climb.
right. That's the difference. In America, we have the terrain to do this. Um, like not even in Colorado, like in Appalachia, like even in like Kentucky, Georgia, Tennessee, Virginia, North Carolina, we can.
We have
There's
20-minute
so
climbs in
many.
Alabama. I mean, they
Yeah, I
used to
mean,
do a road race in conjunction with Sunny King. They did a road race the next day that went up a climb that was just absolutely brutal. I remember one of the women from Rally one year, like almost coming to a standstill out of the breakaway on that climb. And they did a good live stream But I think this brings us back to like the economics piece, and I'm not sure how we
Yeah.
solve this. I know what happened to that race is just that a lot of the amateurs were signing up for the crit and not signing up for the long road race the next day. And then they were doing good production. They were live streaming it. They had motos out there. So it's like, is there a way to kind of like have a quality course but shoestring it, or like what is the stopgap? Like where does that funding come from? Because it is just like a participant driven sport. I'm just
Yeah.
not sure how we crack that. Like maybe we need to, maybe what USA Cycling needs to be doing, because that's all I can think is it's got to be someone who's like in who's in it for the development of the sport, not someone who's trying to make money. And I would hope that that's kind of the role USA Cycling is playing or should play. But like, I know they don't like to be in the event promotion business, but I don't know. Maybe they find some courses and offer some subsidies, or and it's not like they even have a ton of money, but
Right. I mean, their CEO listing was for 350K a year, and I think that's the lowest paid CEO, like in a national level area. So I think in Europe, what they do is they have like an A and a B. So if you are an amateur adult, you race the B race, or you don't race at all.
mm,
And then if you are a pro, a U20, elite U23, elite junior, you race the A race. Um, and the A race is much harder than the B race. And maybe that's what we do is you have an A and a B course where you say, okay, your 50 plus masters, your guys who aren't trying to like race super hard, here's the B course, here's the A course. And then it's okay, you have the pro ones, the 2 3s, the 3 4s, the 4 5s all line up on the same line and first across the line in each category, and they're just scored separately. Um, I don't know if I want to see that because it changes some of the pack dynamics. Like a really fit, actually, like a really fit four could get a lot, like could just smoke races just by being able to stay in the pack.
right.
But this brings something that I feel very passionately about is that the current upgrade system is broken. So
Yeah.
especially with the way the racing is, where you have guys with 3.5 watt per kilo FTPs who can sprint, getting a ton of points super early because all of our races are sprints.
Right.
Whereas you have guys with 4.5 to 5 watt per kilo FTPs stuck in the Cat fours because there's no opportunity for them to win a race.
Yeah, it comes back to the courses. Like there's not a course if you have like long steady power under the hood. And I feel like I see a lot of triathletes who come over to road racing that get frustrated with this. There's nowhere for you to use that you're not just dragging the field around normally. So like
Yep.
the only way that you get a race at a lower category, like a road race in a lower category that doesn't end in a sprint in America, is when it's a guy that no one knows who is very talented from another sport, and he goes away very early, and everyone looks at each other and goes like, "Nah, that guy's coming back." Like, I've never seen
Yeah.
him before. He looks goofy, and he rides away and just like locks into that Iron Man
Right.
pace or
Right.
whatever. And that I feel like there's like two kinds of Cat 4, Cat 5 road races that I see, and one is where one guy or a couple of guys just ride away from the field and get 3 minutes, and the other is where everyone basically chases everything down the entire race. There's no opportunity for anything to get away. Everyone's just quote unquote attacking, but truly just dragging the field around.
Yeah. And
And
that's the
it's
thing with a lot of the American amateur racing is it's like a $50 group ride where like nobody rides hard unless somebody's attacking. And then it settles down, everyone rides easy, someone goes and rides hard again. Like nobody's ever actually like making an effort to race unless it's like a negative racing situation, which is something our team tries to do, which is like initiate breaks and attack and all of that. But
yeah,
like that's
that's
the state of
also
amateur racing.
yeah, that's also a function of there's a total lack, and we're just highlighting all of the problems here and not offering any solutions. The truth is, I'm not sure there are easy like panacea solutions for a lot of these things. I think the solutions I've said before, I think like consistent local like crit and circuit races is going to be the solution for like participation and like getting more people into the sport and skills development. Um, I'm not sure where we go from there, but I think the problem you were just talking about is a function of like we lack a club system in America right now.
Yeah,
I feel like it's
for
still
sure.
pretty strong in Great Britain, but it used to be that there were clubs that are they function as a club as much as a race team where they're like that's who you do your weekly rides with, you pay your dues, those are your mates or whatever, you got the same kit on. And a lot of those are like a stepping stone into racing for people, but at that lower level because people are finding racing from those group rides, there are tactics because you come in and you have a teammate, but the dynamic you were just talking about is a result of the fact that at that lower level, most people don't come in with any teammates. So
Right.
every time something goes up the road, everyone goes, I don't have anyone in that move because I don't have anyone in this race, so I got to chase it. And you get that just like kind of medium hard dragging the field around the whole time, kind of lack of tactical racing.
Right. And I think harder courses may do that where if you have a 3 to 4 minute climb and a 4-5 or a 3-4, that breaks up the field a little bit. And so like we see that at Tonga where there's a 4 minute hill and people kind of shut off the back every little bit. And then on the last lap, you can attack up that hill and get away if you're a solo rider or if you have a team. And like when we were trying to figure out an alternative to Joe Martin, because when I was going to all of our sponsors or potential sponsors and saying, hey, I want a partnership, like, we're going to race Joe Martin and we're going to field two teams in these two categories. And our whole season is based around winning the biggest race in America. We got a lot of people going, hey, that sounds great. We'll do this, this, and this for you because you're going to do this. And now that's been stripped away. And we have to find an alternative of similar value.
Right.
And me and my co-director, Rob, were on the phone for an hour last night trying to find a race to replace
That
it with.
holds the same weight.
That's the problem. So, like, unless we were going to go to California and do Redlands, like, and we just don't have the budget to do that. So then you
Right.
go, okay, what about Vermont, Green Mountain Stage Race? That's a 24-hour drive. Like,
Yep.
that's not happening.
Yep.
In the Southeast, there's not another big stage race.
Yeah.
There's Tonga, which is the amateur equivalent of like that big race, but because we we got two in the top three on the GC at Tonga. One person won. We won 2 out of 4 stages and had two on the podium in the other two stages.
It's kind of
Like,
been there, done that. Like we need to step
right,
up, and there's not a level to step to. I'm looking
right,
at Sepp Kuss's results here, just like seeing with Rally, what races he was doing in that one season. And yeah, there's a lot of like Colorado Classic, like that was a hard race. It's not there anymore. He's
yep,
got the Tour of the Gila, I think still happens. That might be kind of like the one outlier that hopefully still has still has a race. But like, yeah, he did Joe Martin when it was a long stage race. He was in the pro men, but yeah, that's not an option for us anymore.
yeah,
So yeah, there's just like not there's where all of these things like it's a downward spiral, like they all feed into each other where the lack of clubs, they're not attending races and there's not development, so there's just like not a pipeline that would funnel people into these races that
yeah.
are costlier. I mean, there are things like Colorado Classic where I think like maybe we flew a little too close to the sun. I mean, I've said this before on the podcast, but I think that stuff like Tour of California, um, some of these races where we really did try to be like European stage racing fully and have like these huge big budget events with non-endemic sponsors and stuff. I think that was like not sustainable.
I
But I guess
agree.
what I'm trying to find is like the middle ground where like you're saying like there need to be races that where there can be a good hard race that like has some prestige in any area of the country. So whether
Yeah.
it's like we're talking from the southeast perspective, but same thing applies for whatever area you're in. And that prestige can be just based on everyone knows like this is a hard race and it's, you know, been going on for a while and some good people have won it or whatever. I think the
Yeah. I
mistake we
do.
make in America is equating like big budget sponsors with prestige, you know?
I agree. I do want to add one thing. There is one single race in the Southeast with a course that is noteworthy,
What's
and
that?
that's the Carter County Omnium out of like Johnson City, Tennessee.
Oh yeah.
So they do a TT with a 3 mile climb in the TT, and then they have a road race with a 7.8 mile climb as a summit finish, and then
Yep.
they have a crit. So, and all the categories go up, like do the same courses. The difference is the Pro 1, 2 do like a bonus lap of something else and then go up the climb. So that's the only race in the Southeast that is open to amateurs that has a course that is stage race worthy. And it's an omnium. Obviously, it's an omnium because in a 4-5, someone's going to win that climb by 5 minutes and just have the race off of
Yeah.
that. So it's an omnium for like, you
I'm
have to
not
do
against
well
the
across the board.
Yeah,
But
I'm not against these races being omniums. I think that's fine. It's more a
I
question
agree.
of like, are the courses high enough quality that it's like developing people who can race hard? And you could say I'm just like thinking from the devil's advocate perspective here, like, oh, what about countries where it's flat, like the Netherlands or something? But they have super hard racing because they have cremesses that are longer than the crits we have. So that they're like 2.5 hour cremesses, more
Yep.
technical. They're riding, there's like narrow roads, cobblestones, road furniture. There's just a lot more like stuff to deal with. And then you would say like, well, isn't that unsafe? It probably would be if you threw American racers into that, but because they have such a strong like development pipeline where kids are riding from a very young age and they start them out in BMX and then you move from BMX to cyclocross and you
Yep.
develop a ton of skills and then you move into those races. It's just it's a whole pipeline that we don't have. I will harp on the fact that I think cyclocross needs to come back in a big way, and I think it needs to be like a place where people start more.
I agree. Like that's the thing. Like you mentioned, Europe starts off road, and then those off road kids go to road racing. In America, we're starting to see a little bit of that with NICA, but because NICA is so like those courses are so tame, you're not getting that same level of handling, which is why Georgia is now GCA, why Alabama is now
Right.
ACA.
Yeah.
So I think we're starting to see that a little more. There's a lot more bike hand. Like I see kids from Birmingham, Riley Oberding, doing one-handed wheelies. Like I,
And racing for
an
the EF
American's not
development.
doing that
Yeah,
unless
yeah.
all that back, right?
He's doing one-handed wheelies on the EF development team too. Like
Right.
he's he he's like the exception. So I guess I do want to. That's like a positive note to end this on. I don't want to just talk about like stage racing is dead. All the races are too easy. Americans, we suck because we have to do these easy races, and that's all of that aside, there are good kids coming through, and there's a fringe of like good stuff happening, and I think the
Yeah.
push in high school. First of all, just the high school mountain bike league getting so many kids exposed to the sport, regardless of the quality of those races, I think is going to just deepen the talent pool in general. Like we
Yep.
see it locally that a lot of those kids are now showing up to the road group rides and they would not have known that that existed otherwise. Like I didn't know that cycling was a thing when I was in high school.
Yeah. I
So
mean, there's a 13-year-old who's in the front group with us at Worlds every week.
yeah,
Like that doesn't happen without NICA.
right.
Not really, unless you
No,
have a parent who's been in the sport for 40 years.
it didn't before NICA. Like when
Right.
I started racing, I started riding that ride, like the local fast drop ride or whatever in like 2013 probably, and I was 23 and I was like the young guy. This was
Right.
like kind of the post Lance Fallout era where everyone that was into it was old, but there were truly zero teenagers. And now the A group on any given night is 30-40% teenagers. So
Yeah, the A
just
group is us and then like 3 or 4 teenagers.
right.
Like
Ju-
that, which is awesome,
it's
actually.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. Just by them being exposed to the sport, regardless of like kind of the quality of those NICA courses, which are now getting better because like the ACA courses, part of the reason they moved away from NICA to ACA was to have more latitude to make more challenging courses. And then, like also to go back to when I started and hopeful note here, like when I started, there were also no younger people going to that like development level that we see Riley on now. Like I think
Yeah.
that shows like a positive progression in like what the pipeline is. And there's like maybe less money in the sport overall, but there are more young people getting into it. And that is really the only way to develop talent is to get kids in and like exposed to the concept of bike racing when they're younger.
Yeah. The way to develop talent is like get kids when they're 8, 9, 10, get them into like casual racing, casual competitiveness, like get them to the thought of, okay, I need to go faster without putting that pressure on them that you see in like travel baseball. Like not do the travel baseball thing, but do the
Yeah.
okay, let's get a little bit faster. And then you go to 12, 13, they start getting into NICA, they start racing a little bit, like actual racing. And then in high school, you go, they've already been riding for 7 years. You think about the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, they've got 6,000 hours logged by the time they're in ninth grade. And they're already at such a higher level than they would have been. And in Birmingham, like mountain biking, we have like Jerry DeFore, who kind of came up and raced World Cups. Like there's been these like one-offs, but to really get these kids from the like the NICA to the next level, it takes people who actually know what they're doing. Like coaches, like when I say coaches, I don't mean like NICA parents. I mean like people who understand training, who have an eye for talent, know what it looks like, and know how to develop it in a healthy way, and
Yeah.
like a decent backing and support system behind that coach. And like you see that with somebody like Riley, who has like actual coaching and like solid parents and background and all these things. And it's going to, because of NICA, we're going to see more and more and more of that situation where parents, oh, this kid at 11 is like winning all these races and he's catting up more and more. And oh, he's beating the 14-year-olds and he's 11 or whatever. They go and say, okay, how do we get him? Like, okay, now we can invest in him. Where you and I, like, thankfully, I had very supportive parents, but like, there wasn't that, like, no, I didn't there was no like, oh, Ben might be kind of fast until I was a senior in high school, right? And at that point, it's far too late. USAC talent ID is done with you by the time you're 18. Like,
Yep.
and so getting these kids identified earlier is where you start to see that actual development to international racing. I think
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
starting to
So
kind of see that pipeline.
So if that's like the point to kind of like tie a bow on it, if the point is like the international, like how do American riders excel on the world stage? I think the positive note to end on is that the NICA talent development, talent ID pipeline, the when we say NICA high school mountain biking, whatever, whether they're NICA affiliated or not, the explosion of that is going to create a big pool of talent. And then I think to kind of tie it back to the rest of this podcast, we saw this with Riley. The fact that these crits are getting longer and harder. Here's the path forward, I think, maybe, is the crits become more Cremesse like. They get longer, they get more technical, they get a higher level of competition consistently. And then we're kind of graduating kids who have skills already from mountain biking into that crit racing scene. I think
Yep,
that could be the future.
I think you're right. Courses need to be harder. They need to be faster. They need to be longer. Period.
maybe we will see that with NCL. We don't know. That could be our next episode. We're hoping to get that interview done. So NCL teams are having their team camp right now. So it might actually be good that that got postponed because maybe they'll have more info on what's going on with NCL. But yeah, we hope that'll be coming up soon. We'll definitely have that interview out before the NCL season starts. Skeptical but interested in what they're doing there, and excited for the rest of the crit racing season to get started.
Yep,
Um,
we're not far off from it.
yeah, Ben, you want to plug your coaching business before we get out of here? I realize I've been
Yeah,
a bad YouTuber, not ever, like
no,
and subscribe and
it's
all
all
that
good.
stuff. But Ben,
Um,
plug your
yeah, if you
coaching
are
company.
interested in coaching, I don't have a website up because I'm really bad at doing that. But I do have an Instagram. It's just Skyway Cycling. You can hit me up in the DMs there, or my personal Instagram is just Ben Edwards with dots between BE and N, and then Edwards. Hit me up there. I can absolutely consult with you and kind of see if that's something you might be looking at. So yeah,
And everybody, I guess in the meantime, I feel like we've been so negative on American racing and everyone is going to have ideas. So tell us in the comments, what did we miss? What does American racing need to be doing? Is it fine now? Let's discuss it and give us some more stuff to chew on before the next episode. But yeah, we will be back in 2 more weeks. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Um, the American Peloton, man, every time totally fumble the name. The American
oh man.
Peloton, episode 4, signing off. See you guys.